I'm gonna show captions.
You can see me.
Gotta take some weight off that.
Not
That was too
bad.
tight. Oopsie. Yeah.
What do I have? Questions?
All the things. So many things.
Lots of things. Let's see. Oh, we're up to 24 in participants already.
Nice. That's tight. Not that tight. What is up with that guy? I gotta take some weight off him.
In just 1 second, I'm going to click start. Let's see. Participants, open.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
moved this anyway, so just as well.
Okay, I'm going to start.
Okay.
Here we go. Start.
Start.
I'm serious. I mean it.
For reals.
I always have to say it twice. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Here they come.
Huzzah.
How is everybody today?
I'm doing good. How are you guys? Oops. I just messed this up. I did.
I am fine also.
I had a nice
I'm
nap. I'm good.
a little worried my Loom's going to be too noisy. And I can't.
Nah.
I'm worried mine might be too noisy too. But maybe I can't hear your Loom. Are you
I
leaving?
can't either.
You can't? Oh, good. Okay.
No.
I was just worried it was going to make it hard to have a conversation.
Mm-mm.
That's excellent news. I'm glad to hear it. And look, I'm actually weaving.
Both of you
I'm
are
not sure
actually
I've really
weaving.
done much actual weaving during Live at the Loom so far.
I know.
Mostly Loom setup.
Well, hello, everybody. Here we are again at Live at the Loom with Carly and Janet. All questions are fair game. Use the Q&A interface. I'm going to do my spotlight thing. So in the video, you'll see bigger pictures of whoever we're spotlighting, if you can't see that on your screen the way it is. And I've got some other pictures to share when I'm instructed to do so. And let's see, you can turn on closed captioning and watch the words scroll across the bottom of the screen. You can also turn on the full transcript so the words don't fall off. You'll see the whole thing and it'll just keep going. Let's see. I don't think I have anything else to say about that. How shall we start? You want to see what we're doing?
Yeah. Why don't you
All
show
right.
them the pictures of what's on each loom so that, because it's not easy to see from the angles necessarily.
You're right. All right, great. Let me get that organized here. Hold on 1 second. Share screen. I want to share this one. All right, can everyone see Janet's scarf?
I don't see it on my phone, but maybe if I go, yes, now if I go that way, I see what you're seeing. Yes, there it is.
Okay.
There's my scarf.
There it is.
Ta-da.
It's so pretty.
It is pretty.
Yeah, I like it. I'm glad I took whatever advice was offered when I was picking out my yarns.
And let's see, here's what Carly's working on. I love the hits of pink, Carly. I like that a lot.
Thanks.
And is that's your hand spun?
No, because the color values between my hand spun and the ground cloth are so similar. The hand spun just sort of dips into nowhere. There is a little bit of pink hand spun. It's not the bright pink. It's like just here and there. But so I failed at that, but it's okay.
Well, that is what experimental projects are all about. You just make decisions on the fly and you do what's going to work.
Listen to Tien. Tien knows what she's talking about.
I'm gonna stop
Amazing.
sharing. All right, so where should we go first?
I
Janet?
have some show and tell if we don't have questions from the crowd to
Not
begin
yet.
with.
Not
Okay.
yet.
So I want to talk about something, a choice I made. I've got this threaded on 4 shafts, and it's mostly straight draw with some basket weave here and there. But anyway, it's a 4 shaft. So I decided to tie my loom up directly, but not in the usual way. So usually with a direct tie, if you tie treadle 1 to shaft 1, treadle 2 to shaft 2, treadle 3 to shaft 3, treadle 4 to shaft 4. I have mine tied up treadle 1 to shaft 1, treadle 2 to shaft 3, treadle 3 to shaft 4, and treadle 4 to shaft 2. You don't need to like try to write that down and remember it, because I've written up something that I'll post before too long about this tie up. But the advantage of that is that I'm doing straight twill here. So it's, the tie up is normally, or you make the sheds by raising 1 and 2, then 2 and 3, then 3 and 4, then 1 and 4, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 1 and 4, repeat, repeat, repeat. And it's very, it's hard for me to not get distracted, because that's very simple and it's a short repeat, but it's changing every time. I get distracted. My mind wanders, and sometimes I screw it up, even though it's a very simple little thing. With this tie up, I'm always using 2 feet, because it's 2 shafts up and down and direct tie up. But my feet go in a particular rhythm that's very easy to keep track of. So I just did shafts 2 and 3 up. That's my center 2 feet. My shuttle is on the right side. That means I need to move my right foot, and it's going to move it has 2 treadles. It's already on one. It's going to move to the other one. And then on the next shed, I still have both feet down, left and right. On the next shed, my shuttle will be over on the left side. That means my left foot needs to move. It's only got one place to go because it's already standing on one of the treadles. It's going to move to the other one. And then my shuttle will be on the right, and my right foot moves to the other one. And then my shuttle will be on the left, so my left foot moves to the other one. So each time, one foot stays down where it was, and the other foot just moves to its only other choice. And then the next shed, the other foot is going to move to its only other choice. And I just keep doing that over and over, and I never get screwed up, because I always know which foot needs to move, because there's my shuttle, and there's only one place for it to go. And the end result is that it's very easy to not screw up this treadling that I usually get very distracted when my mind wanders, or I'm having a conversation, or I'm talking to the screen or something. And it's also very easy to know where to go next, because right now I figure out, okay, that's the shed that my weft just went through, put it in place. My shuttle's attached on the right. That means my right foot has to move. There it goes. And now my left foot has to move. There it goes. Now my right foot moves. Has only one place to go. My left foot moves. Only one place to go.
Sorry.
So each time I only move one foot, it only has one choice, and it's very easy to go to the right place and hard to go to the wrong place. So this is one of my preferred ways of treadling a 2-2 twill. And I have yet to meet a direct tie-up loom where I can't rearrange the ties. I mean, normally a direct tie-up loom is a permanent connection between treadle 1 and shaft 1, treadle 2, shaft 2, etc. But usually you can undo those knots and move the cords around and retie the knots so that you can change the direction. Another advantage of this particular tie-up is that if I wanted to do plain weave, I would step on the 2 left treadles, and then the 2 right treadles, and then the 2 left treadles, and the 2 right treadles. That's odds versus evens, odds versus evens, rather than having to step on 1 and 3 and then lift both feet and move them to 2 and 4, and then lift both feet and move them back to 2 and 4. You usually wind up kind of rocking to change your balance point so you can lift both feet. And that's kind of hard on your body. and it's a little slower. It probably messes with your salvages. It's easier if you can just go left treadles, right treadles, left treadles, right treadles, even though they each happen to be tied up to only one shaft. So that's my big useful piece of information for this until I find a knot.
We have a question for you on that.
Okay.
Why don't you tie up 2 shafts on 1 foot treadle?
Oh, I can, but then I always have to move 1 foot. I have to change feet, and I have more choices for where to go next. So if I was tied up in the normal way, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 1 and 4, and I'm stepping on 1 treadle, well, there are 3 other places that I could go now for the next treadle. And if I'm distracted, it's very easy for me to step on the wrong thing because I've got 3 choices and only one of them is right. With the other tie up, I only have 1 choice as long as I know, I'm paying attention to which side my shuttle is attached to.
Another question now from Christy Lofton about your tie up. When you have to start a new bobbin, do you start the new one on the same side to keep right with right foot or left with left foot?
When I start a new bobbin, yes, I always keep it going in the same direction, unless there's some sort of unusual, very good reason to do something different. But my default, and certainly if I'm not changing colors and I'm not changing treadling, that is to keep going in the same direction, especially if you're joining the end of one bobbin and the beginning of a new one. You have to keep going in the same direction or else the thread will turn around and go back the other way.
Great.
So right now I'm stepping around to try to figure out there. I didn't know which shed I was on, which one I had just done, but I just, I stepped on combinations till I found it. And here's where I am. And I know that my shuttle's attached on the right side. That means my next shed, I have to move my right foot. And there I go.
Janet, do you remember when we did we showed you using your 2 sets of leaf sticks? Was that the last session?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Pretty
John,
sure.
you can check that video out. We are getting questions about what Carly is wearing, so I'm going to spotlight her for a second.
What Carly's wearing?
Uh-huh. Everybody thinks it's fabulous. What is it? Did you make it? How's it made? And someone thinks it's a butterfly jacket.
It's a cocoon coat. Let's see. Should I get
Yep.
a swirl?
Oh, look at that.
Here.
Ooh, beautiful.
Okay, let me stand up. Let's see.
It is a butterfly. Wow, that's awesome.
It's a blanket that I made, and then I took the blanket and sewed it. So it's just a square. And then I sewed it up on the sides, leaving a hole. So it's just a rectangle. Take your blanket, fold it in half, sew on one side, leave a hole, and then you put your hands into the holes, and you get to work. And it's so cozy.
Awesome. It was very cozy.
Yeah.
Lovely. It must
All
be
right,
colder there than it is in my house, even though it's probably cold outside.
Well, I'm in my basement, so it's a little chill. Sorry. So thank you. That's so nice.
And while we're here, Carly, you're using a shuttle that Sharon Gibson hasn't seen before with the thread wound around it. What's it called, and does it work well?
Okay, so I wrapped this horridly last night because I usually use a drill. So this is my new shuttle hack, and I wish it was a little bit nicer. See how it's kind of like coming off on one end? This is what happens if you don't wind your shuttles very nicely. So when I went and saw, sorry, I'm gonna move myself up, so I'll just be right here. All like hunched into the screen. Janet has, I think, are they in the toolbox, all the videos I did? Of
the bobbins. Yeah, bobbins and perns, winding those, yes.
Okay, so when she was showing how to wind a pern that goes onto a fly shuttle, is that right? Wait.
An end feed shuttle. Yeah.
And, okay, that's right. And then winding the pern and how you throw the pern and it just like naturally comes off the side of the shuttle. I was like, that's so cool. What if I just take a dowel and I wind it like you wind a pern? So it just automatically feeds off the end as I weave. So then I kind of get the advantage of weaving with a shuttle where I'm not like winding it around a stick the whole time, right? I have to do the stick thing. It just comes off the edge, but it's not as thick as a shuttle because my shed is so tiny that I really have never been able to totally master working with a shuttle on a rigid heddle loom. I know that they make like the really narrow shuttles, but I feel like I'm just stopping every like 2 inches to rewind my shuttles, and I'm like, this is not saving me any time. So, I actually have a video that's just on my own YouTube. Maybe we should put one up on the HA on how to do this properly, so it's actually wound nice. You're not talking to your husband, just like winding it, but using a drill and using the exact same method that that Janet shows for winding a pern. And I don't know, it's been kind of, I love it. And these are super cheap. If I wanted to, I think it'd be kind of cool to take these and point the, sand down this edge so it's a little bit finer. So then you could actually do pickup patterns and then, draw it through without having all these pickup sticks. I don't know. I'm still experimenting with it, but that is what that is.
So you wound that by hand, not with a drill.
Yeah, and that's why it's just, I'm hoping if I keep weaving with it, it'll finally get to a point where it's not knotting up on itself yet. I can still use it, but it's not very comfortable. Just because it's unwrapping and wrapping itself around itself but it's not knotting. So I'll just keep working with it until it gets to a comfortable place.
I wonder, like when you're working with a pern and you fill it up, you've got certain, here we go. It's got a thick end and a thin end, and you've got sort of a butt there, and the thread pulls off the point all the time. And in the shuttle, there's something to keep the thread always directed off the point. I wonder if your system would somehow, if there was just the tiniest little loop or something on the pointy end of your shuttle to keep the thread directed that way rather than off the butt, if that would make a difference.
That's an interesting idea. I actually have one that's wrapped up a lot nicer that I could show you what it looks like when you do it correctly. But this is usually how mine look. So they're not totally like a pern, but
That's more like a quill. Okay.
a little bit
Yeah.
more like a quill, but just the way it comes off, quills, they do this.
Right. They come off the side. Yeah.
Yeah. So it still does that. That's not too bad. But yeah, but if you put one on the edge, like a little loop there, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
That
well,
could be.
where you've got it, where you don't have like a butt end and it's sort of just a cylinder on there, you really want it to be able to come off in both directions. The pern, you want it to always come off one end of the thing, not both. So then there, it makes sense, but I'm not sure it does make sense in your situation.
You mean like you don't want it to come off this way?
Yeah.
This way?
Yeah, you only want it to come one way, whichever is not your big end. You want it to come off the small end.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. But this one, it's like if I wove like this, it'd still be really hard for it. It doesn't want to come off.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's not really quite woven, it's not really wound quite as perfectly as the purple are. It doesn't have that nice shape, but I'm still playing with it. I saw backstrap weavers use similar things, and
Yeah.
amazing. Like I could have a million shuttles and
Right. All you need is a stick.
yeah. So, and the only thing I dislike about them is when I leave here, I think it's time for me to kind of move my thing forward. If I am weaving something, I oftentimes like to use the edge of my shuttle. So if I were to want to set this thing in place, or if I want to beat a little bit harder, I use my shuttles like swords, and I do this a lot because I find it's really hard to get any kind of density just with this. Like the plastic, it's not very heavy, it's kind of a little wishy-washy. And so if I'm using something like this, I have to have like a separate thing, and that's like an extra action. But for something like this where I don't have to beat it super tight, it's not like a weave with like the weft facing on the top, then I don't really have to worry about it. So something like this still works for me. But
So if you used a drill, you would just stick one end of that in the drill and turn the drill on and wind.
yep.
Yeah. Brenda, Carly's using a rigid heddle loom, so she doesn't have treadles to step on. All the action is done with the heddles that she's moving back and forth, and she's using one with, how many heddles do you have going? You have a pickup and 2 heddles?
Oh, are you talking to
Oh,
me?
yeah, I was asking you, how many heddles do you have going there? You've got 2 and a pickup stick, or just 2?
I just have 2 heddles.
Okay.
I'll explain what these sticks are back here. This is my hack. So this loom is just such a basic piece of equipment, and it's so much, this space between here and here is so tiny compared to a floor loom, which means that all of these little crosses that are happening back here do actually matter a little bit with your tension. Plus, there's not a lot, there's like stretchy yarns with not stretchy yarns. So the tension with this is kind of a mess. Plus, I have, just a proportion if something is just this much longer than the rest of them on a floor loom, just the length that you have, that proportion is much more favorable to you to get like still nice sheds, where with this short, especially this samplet, it's like so short. I have less problems with the normal Ashford looms, which are a lot longer. So what I do is I put my heddles down, and then I put in one pickup stick, and I lift up my heddles, I put in another pickup stick, and it's kind of providing an extra piece of tension, so some of those length issues kind of balance out back here, and then it's pulled under tension as it goes through these sticks, and then I get much better tension and much better shed. So this shed's actually looking pretty good, which is, it's still tiny, we have little sheds, but that's okay. Where there's a shed, there's a way. So that's for if you're working with cotton, linen, if you have like a few ends which are just starting to get loose as you weave, this can keep you from having to have like, sorry, I feel like I'm in the camera's in such a weird position. I feel like that keeps you from having to have like each end weighted down, and you have all these dangly things in the back of your loom, which is really hard if you're like me and you move your loom around. I don't want to have a lot of that stuff. So this helps that issue like quite a bit. And then if I needed to, I could actually do it again. So I could actually have rows of these, like 3 or 4. And then by the time you do that, it catches all of those like errant little knotty ends that want to be a little bit looser, a little bit tighter, and gives you just like a better working area. And I just messed up. There we go. Let's go fix this. There we go. Let's do the right one.
Janet, what are you working on?
Oh, hang on, I have a knot as promised.
Oh, great.
Ta-da!
I'm gonna ask Carly a quick question, then we're coming to watch you with the knot. Hold on one second.
Okay,
Carly, is your pattern a 2-2 twill? The sticks in the back for tension would really help achieve clean sheds, which is sometimes an issue with multi-heddles. That's from Cass.
Oh, hey, are you asking if this structure I'm working on is a 2-2-12?
Yes.
This is actually a huck. I think it's a huck. There. So we go in a little bit closer. So you could actually do this with pickup sticks if you wanted to.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you would just have to change out your pickup sticks like every other pick, which is something I don't do. So if I use a pickup stick, it has to be good for at least 4 picks. But so yeah, so it's a twill, but also yes, doing this if you're working with multiple heddles and your tension's getting wonky, yes, it will help with everything. It helps everything.
Excellent. All
Yeah.
right, we're coming to you now, Janet. Here we go.
Okay. So, not in this pink thread right here. So what I've got another length of the pink thread. I just roughly measured it, nose to fingertip to make sure it's going to be long enough to reach the end of my scarf so that once I change the thread once, I don't have to do it again. I wrapped the extra around an empty core and I'm putting that in a shuttle. That's going to just be my yarn storage that can sit on the floor so that if your weighted end just dangles off the back of the loom, it can spin and spin and spin and unply. If you anchor it to the floor, it won't do that. And you can either do that by putting the yarn source on the floor or by hanging a thread like a shoelace or something off of it. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use this end to replace the thread with the knot. So step one, and here I'm going to, let's see. Oh, I think this is probably just as good a viewpoint as any. So here is the thread in question. And do I have a comb? No. All right. So I want to not lose track of the thread in question. Here it is. I'm going to mark it back here behind because I'm going to be back there and I want to be able to find it easily. All right. Yarn source goes on the floor. And I'm going to put the thread through the same heddle as the one that has the knot. It's easier to do when your eyes are younger. Okay. Now, same thread through the same dent of the reed as the one with the knot, which is right here. So, if I were close to the beginning of my project, I would be tempted to pull out enough length on this new thread that I could sew it back through the fabric and replace the one with the knot entirely. But I am nowhere near the beginning of the fabric, so that's not going to do me any good. I'm not going to sew this all the way back, 30 inches or however far I've gone. So what I'm going to do instead is pin it to the fabric. And for that, I need a pin. I just usually use this kind of, quilter's pin, big knob on one end. The knob doesn't really, I suppose if I was doing very, very, very fine threads, a knob that big might be an issue, but on these thick threads, it's not going to matter. I stick the pin down into the fabric in line with this thread that has the knot in it. And coming across, so I'm under maybe a centimeter of fabric, and the both ends of the pin are up. Let me see if I can get this closer. So here, both ends of the pin are pointing up, and I'm going to go around that with the thread in a figure 8. So I want it to come back pretty straight. This I've got about 1/2 inch from the edge of the woven cloth, but it could be anywhere that's easy to get. So I could do it, 2 inches back or whatever's convenient. So I'm going to wrap around that in a figure 8. So I'm going to go under one end, under the other end, under the first end again, under the second end. That anchors it to the pin. And then I'll tuck the point of the pin into the fabric so I won't stab myself with it. And now that also anchors the pin so that it doesn't twist. And now I can put some weight on that thread so that it won't, so that it has the same amount of tension as the rest of the warp, and the pin is anchoring it so it won't pull out. I still have 2 threads through that dent and through that heddle. There are 2 threads that are traveling together right now. I'm going to go put the weight on. I'll be right back. For this time, I'm going to try an S hook with a great big nut for weight and see if that is a good amount of weight. And I might have to add more, or I might have to take the nut off and put something lighter on, but I think at least this much is going to be good because this is a really chunky cotton yarn. Okay. So now I'm going to, well, I can take that marker off. I don't want that to get hooked up on stuff. Now I'm going to weave for about an inch, and there'll be a spot here where I've got two threads traveling together. That's overlapping them right in the shed. So the same way we overlap the beginning and end of a bobbin. Where's my weft? Here we go. I need to make that a little tighter, I think. Oh, maybe not. I'll try. That's the one. Shuttle is attached on the right, so move my right foot. So I'll weave for maybe half an inch. Whatever seems like an appropriate amount of overlap to secure the join. Oh, there's another knot. Oh, wait, maybe that, oh, good. No, that's the same one I'm taking out. Phew. Okay, so now those are overlapped by about half an inch. So now I can just cut this thread that has the knot. Scissors. Chop. I'm going to tuck this end under that same pin just to keep it out of the way. And then pull that out.
Janet, where exactly does the weight go? The S hook and the weight?
It is hanging from the thread. Hang on one sec. Let me get that loose one out. Okay, there. So the thread is hanging off the back of the loom, and I attached the S hook to it so that the S hook is hanging freely. It's not sitting on the floor, but it's as close to the floor as I could get it so that it has the most length. As I advance the warp, that S hook is going to rise because it's tied to the string. And if I had put it up close to the back beam, I'd only be able to advance a little bit before I'd have to move it again. So it is very close to the floor right now. I can see if I can, I don't want to make anybody seasick. Can you see it down? No, you cannot.
No.
See if I pull on it. Oh, look, I got the right one. If I pull, there it is.
Ah.
So I'm going to let it back down, and it's just skimming the floor. And then once it lifts up close to the back beam, I'll have to drop it again.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Do we have a toolbox on fixing a broken thread yet?
No.
I feel like we do.
But we can make it now out of that video. Or I could do another one that's, that isn't live.
Okay.
But for the time being, we can stick that video in there. If this had been a broken thread instead of a knot, there would have been a hole, like a hole in the reed or a thin spot in the reed and an empty heddle. You do exactly the same thing. You put the thread from the back through the empty heddle and then through the space in the reed where the old thread used to be, and then you pin it on and you do exactly the same thing. You just don't have this built-in overlap. So later you may need to do something to overlap the old and the new a little bit if you can, or you just let the old thread and the new thread meet at a point without any overlap if that's going to be okay in your fabric. But this sort of proactively dealing with a knot before the thread breaks, or dealing with a thread that looks like it's going to break before it breaks, so that you can have two threads through the heddle and two threads through the reed and weaving together for a little bit, that weaves in the overlap without you having to do anything afterwards.
All right, before you start weaving again, I've got a complicated question for you.
Okay.
Jill Carrick says, your discussion about direct tie-up reminds me of a question. I just finished a Huck lace shawl. Shaft 1 is only tied to harness 1, which has, I guess, treadle 1 is tied to harness 1, which has most of the heddles on it. Shaft 2 is tied up to 2, 3, 4. The beginning and end of the project called for shaft 1 and 2 alternated for 2 inches instead of plain weave. I'm surprised to find that it looks like plain weave. I thought it would look like basket weave, but it looks like plain weave. Why is that?
It's going to be due to your threading. You said, I believe you said Huck lace, but
Yep.
it sounds to me like it might be Spot Bronson, because Spot Bronson goes, for example, 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 3 1 4 1 4 1 3 1 3 1 2 1 2, etc., etc. So the floats are on shafts 2, 3, and 4, and every other thread is shaft 1. What you need in order to create plain weave is to lift up every other thread and then throw your shuttle, or lower, and then to either lift up every other thread or to lower every other thread, depending on whether you have a rising shed or a sinking shed loom. You throw your shuttle through that shed, and then you do the reverse. So you lift up every thread, for instance. I mean, that's kind of a facetious way of putting it, but all the other threads you didn't lift before, or you lower them and you throw your shuttle back. So when your threading is, for example, 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 3 1 4 1 4 1 3 1 3 1 2 1 2, etc., every other thread is on shaft 1. So if you lift shaft 1, you're lifting up every other thread, and all the rest of them are on 2 3 4. So lift up shaft 1, that lifts half the threads, every other shuttle, and then you need the reverse, which is to lift everything that isn't 1. So plain weave is not 1 and 3 versus 2 and 4, or odds versus evens. It happens to be when you have a threading like straight draw, where the threading alternates odds and evens, but that's not always the case. So going back to that example, 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 3 1 4 1 4, that does not alternate odd and even all the way, because 1 is always odd, and in that 1 3 1 3 1 section, it goes odd 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 odd. So lifting the odds versus the evens would make a big float there. So there is a toolbox on how do I get plain weave on this threading, or can I get plain weave on this threading? So you can find that in the toolbox.
Jill says, thank you. That makes sense. And yes, it is Spot Bronson.
Yeah, great. Oh, got to move my camera again so I don't bump it. Gonna hit it with my shuttle every time. There. Were there other questions, or was I in the middle of something?
Nope, I don't have any other questions at the moment.
Okay.
We did the knot thing. That was good.
I can show you one more thing that I have on the go here. I have this measuring thread. My intent for this shawl, scarf, it's wide enough that it could really be either thing. My intent is just to weave until I run out of warp, however long that happens to be. I put on a 3-yard warp, so it's, that's going to be long enough if I get close to the end. But at the same time, so I don't really care how long it is. I'm not keeping track of stripes or anything. I'm just doing the same treadling the entire way through. So I don't need any method to keep track of where I've changed colors, where I've changed treadling, any of that. I decided I did want to know how close I was to acceptable shawl length, because maybe I come to a knot, or I break a thread, or some sort of dire thing happens when I'm getting close to the end. I want to know, have I gone far enough? Do I have to fix this? Do I have to deal with that? Or can I just say, that's long enough? If my shawl is only 70 inches, that could make a scarf, but that's pretty short for a shawl, unless it's for a smaller person. I'm aiming for, somewhere closer to 80 inches. So I measured this string 84 inches. I don't necessarily care. I'm not going to necessarily stop at the end of this string, but I'll be able to tell how close I am to 84 inches by how much of the string is left. So what I did was this is just a 8-2 cotton in hunter orange, because I knew it would show up well, and it's fairly fine. You can use anything that's fine and a contrasting color and something that isn't stretchy. and I put a loop at one end and I measured out the length that I wanted, 84 in this case, and I pinned that loop to the hem stitching at the front end. And now when I advance my warp, every time or two that I advance my warp, I tuck the thread under one warp end. So every 6, 8 inches or so, the thread has been tacked down to the surface of the fabric so that it doesn't get tangled up in stuff, and so that it wraps onto the cloth beam along with everything else without adding any bulk. I don't want to add something that's going to mess with my tension. That's why it's skinny. And it's just under one little thread, so it'll be super easy to pull it out later. And so now, I mean, I don't know how much of this is left, but that is about how much weaving I have left to do. If I fold it in half and then in half again, oh, that's about a foot. So I have maybe about 48 inches left to go. My purpose is not necessarily to know how much further I need to go in this case. It's to know, am I close enough? I'm clearly not close enough to shawl length now because I've got a lot of string left. But if I'm coming along and I've got, 3 inches of string left and I run into a big knot or some other calamity, I can just say, I'm done. Done like dinner. If I cared how long the thing would be, well, then I would weave to the end of the string and then stop.
All right, we have no questions at the moment. Should we check in with Carly for a second?
Yeah.
Let's see what Carly's up to. Spotlight. Moving right along. How's it going, Carly?
Doing good. So I'm on my last piece of paper, which is I use tagboard papers, which are 48 inches long. So I know once I get to my last one that I only have 48 inches left. I also put inch marks on them. So that kind of lets me know how much warp I have left. I'm going to add onto Janet's string things. I learned something super, super weird because if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong with something I'm weaving. I just made some patterns for a company, and one of them was corduroy. And the corduroy, like on the loom, it's like this thick. It's a pretty thick thing. And I was doing that thing where, you kind of like have the measuring tool, whatever it is, either a piece of string, this one was a measuring tape, rolling in with my weaving.
Mhm.
And because of the thickness of the fabric and it was sitting on top, it was quickly adding inches that weren't actually being woven. So 12 inches on the loom measured out more like 18 inches because of the way that it was just a difference between the measurement of the top of the cloth versus the bottom. So if you are doing any kind of thing where you need to measure, it needs to be accurate. If it is sitting on top of your cloth or being integrated into your cloth and your cloth has any thickness to it, I don't think it's going to matter on something like this or a scarf, but oh boy, it really mattered. And I ended up having to remeasure all these samples. And then what I ended up doing was I ended up just measuring on this end, putting like a little thread and a half hitch, like a little red thread.
Yep.
Leaving for putting another half hitch, hanging it out. So then I could go through and just count how many threads I had.
Yep.
Slide. And then that told me how many inches I actually had on the loom. But yeah, it was like, wow, things you just don't even think are going to go wrong.
And there's some of that going on here too, because I'm basically measuring under tension. But once I take the tension off, the cloth is going to relax and get shorter. But my plan is to weave, when I plan out my projects, I always measure under tension, under light tension, and then I figure out how long I'm going to weave under light tension. So when I do my math, if you look at crunching the numbers, there's a course called Crunching the Numbers. Whenever I'm doing my math, I'm doing it in terms of loom length on the loom, not length, and how long it needs to be on the loom to get what I want once it comes off of the loom. So that when I'm measuring under light tension, I'm going to get the end result that I want. And as far as tension, this is maybe worth flipping the camera back just for a bit. How much tension to put on your warp while you weave. New weavers especially tend to crank the tension way up because that's how they find they get tidy, even selvages. But you don't need that much tension on your loom. You only need enough tension on the warp to keep the shuttle from falling through. So I don't know if you can see, but this is pretty springy. I weave with pretty light tension on a jack loom. I weave with more tension on a counterbalance loom because the threads are not, they're always going an equal distance, whether they're rising or staying down or going down. On a jack loom, the ones that go up get pulled tight compared to the ones that stay down. And so the more tension you put on the warp, the more strain you're putting on your hips and your knees. And on a counter marsh loom, I have more tension again. But on a jack loom, I like my tension quite light rather than tight. I make it tighter if I need to control my beat, but otherwise, I like it pretty loose. Well, not loose. It's not sagging, but it's clearly got some flex to it. And that seems to also be an advantage when I'm working with a mixture of yarns, because it's not, if you crank the tension up, some of them are stretched really tight, but the ones that have more elasticity aren't. And that's going to make the shed like tight in some places and looser in others, and the shuttle won't necessarily be able to run smoothly across them. But if everything is a little springy, that's less of an issue.
Cool. Back to measuring for a second. Sonia says that she likes IKEA paper tapes for measuring, and when they get worn out, you just throw them out. And I know that I'm a weaver that's grabbed handfuls of IKEA paper tapes.
Yeah. I have somewhere, I don't know where it is. I haven't done placemats in so long I haven't needed it. But I used to weave a ton of placemats. So I was always measuring 20 inches, 20 inches, 20 inches. And my loom, there's enough room that I can, from the cloth beam to 20 inches, I can reach the whole thing. So I took a measuring tape and cut the thing off at 22 inches because I never needed the rest of the length. And that was very convenient for measuring my placemats. And the little metal tab on the end, I just had stuck to a magnet.
Janet, Ida Lee asks, don't you catch your warp threads more often under such light tension?
If the tension is so light that I catch threads, then I make it a little tighter. But I think you can probably see, or here, let me drop this down. I have, nice clear sheds.
Yep.
It's not sloppy. They're not sagging. They're taut. There's tension on each of these threads. It's just, they're not like drum tight. They've got some squish. And I can feel as I do this, the different stripes have more squish or less squish than others because of the different elasticity of my yarns. And when I take the tension off, the weft creeps forward in the pink stripes compared to some of the other ones because they're more stretchy. But then when I put the tension back on, the fell straightens itself back out again.
Christy says, with lighter tension, do you not get horizontal ridge lines of the fabric not being tight?
No. My beat is consistent, so my weft is being placed at a consistent number of picks per inch, even with my tension lighter. I don't want to sell this as being like loose, sloppy tension. It's not that. It's just not super tight.
You're not cranked up to
no
stiff as a board.
Right.
Carol Patton uses adding machine tape marked with her desired measurements on her projects.
Yeah, I like adding machine tape if I'm keeping track of stripes and things. Or treadling changes, and we use that in our in-person classes so that people can design color changes and treadlings as they go and make notes of any decisions they make while they go. I personally find that roll of paper like distracting. It gets in my way. So if I don't need to keep track of choices like that, then I don't usually use it. But it's a great trick to use in that situation.
It looks like you just took tension off.
I did. I was advancing and more
Oh.
came forward than I want. I don't want to advance it that far, so I'm going to go to the back and wind it backwards some.
Gotcha. Does double weave require more tension?
I wouldn't think so. You need enough tension. You need enough tension to get a clear shed and to support the shuttle. If you've achieved both those goals, then you have enough tension for functionality. You can then adjust the tension further to get the number of picks per inch that you want.
Yeah, we have an unrelated question now. Do you always use your weft for hem stitching, even if the color is very different from the warp colors?
I usually do because it is the same color as the weft. So, you know, it may contrast with what's going warp wise, but it's going to match what's going weft wise. But that's a choice. I mean, you can use an entirely different color if you want your hem stitching to be a focal point. And if you, for some reason, didn't want to use the weft color, you could use a different one, or you could do an edge. You could secure your edge with something other than hem stitching, I suppose. But yes, I usually use my weft unless there's good reason not to. One reason I might not is if my weft is super duper chunky, in which case I might do a couple of picks of something fine and hem stitch around those fine picks with a fine thing, the same thing probably, and then switch to my very chunky weft. Carly, that's a good question. I mean, you can answer for you too.
I'm going to switch over to Carly for a second.
Boy. Yeah, I think I do the same thing. Well, actually, wait. If I'm doing something with a really chunky weft, but my warp is not chunky, then I will hem stitch in the same thing as my warp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, or I'll just use whatever weft I'm using for my hem stitch.
Would you weave a couple of picks of that light, probably warp thing before to hem stitch around, or would you hem stitch around the chunky thing?
I would hem stitch around the lighter thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the thing kind of swallow it a little bit.
Uh-oh, Janet's changing bobbins. We're going to go check that out, and then I'm coming back with a question for you, Carly. Let's see Janet switch.
Okay. I just ran out. My bobbin ran out. Here's a tail hanging out the edge. So I'm just gonna let's see. Did I already change my feet? Yes. So I'll tuck it back in and pull it out so that it hangs out of the fabric with a tail that's a couple inches long there. And then I'm going to throw the shuttle from the same direction. This one entered the shed from the right. So this is going to enter the shed from the right. And I'll pull a tail out again. I usually have maybe a 1/4 inch or so overlap between the old and the new. And if I'm using a dark brown weft. If I had a brown warp stripe, I would rearrange things to have my overlap be in that brown spot. But this is going to contrast with my warp anywhere it falls, so it doesn't really matter where it lands. So I'm just going to have it be where it naturally was. And my old and my new have overlapping there by a 1/4 inch or so. And I'm just going to beat it in and keep going. And leave those tails there until after it's wet finished, and then I'll trim them off. This is very fine. It's like maybe a 10-2 weight, but then it has slubby bits, so thicker slubby parts. So if you look at the picture, I don't know if you can see it here, it probably looks like there's some extra dark brown blobs here and there. That's the slubs. but it's fine enough. And I can't even see, because I don't have my glasses on, how many plies it is. I'm not going to try to split the plies and overlap the and like feather the plies together at all. I'm just going to let the whole thing overlap the whole thing and call it good.
All right, I'm coming back to you, Carly. How much tension do you use?
Ooh, well, that's one of the things that a lot of people don't like about the rigid heddle is you don't get a lot of choice in your tension. I basically I have as much tension as I can have while still being able to move my heddles, because if you go up too high, it gets really hard and you end up scraping the yarn. Hear that? And then that's gonna break your yarn. So I don't have it up quite that high. Plus, it will really hurt your shoulders and arms to constantly be fighting with the tension. So a lot of times I'll actually just put the heddles up, and then I get as much tension as I can get. In the class rigid heddles, ground up rigid heddles, rigid heddles from the ground up. I talk about that issue with the angles and how the rigid heddle works, because you have these threads that don't move, they stay stationary. And so those are going to need to be a little bit shorter than the ones that move, which is fine. See how this goes up at an angle. So when you add that angle, that means that these actually have to be just a tiny bit longer in order to maintain that angle. So when you straighten out your tension with it straight, like this, and you have your ends, your warp ends all the same length, then you're going to end up with that problem where when you put your heddles down, these will end up sagging and you get this really kind of awful shed with your heddles down. But then your shed looks really good when your heddles are up, because these are under this nice tight tension and these are sagging down. So you're like, oh, this is great. And then you reverse your shed and you're like, oh, I can barely even see my shed. And then you try to tighten it, then you can't move your heddles, all that stuff. So first off, I always tension with the heddles in the down position. I think some looms you can do the up position, they're the same basically, but that helps, at least gets me started. And then after that, yeah, I just tension it as tight as I can actually get it, but still move my heddles. But you don't really have a whole lot of, you don't have as much control, minute control over it. If I could redesign anything in rigid heddle, I would add more notches in one of these so you could actually get it a little bit finer. Because I find a lot of times I'm like, this is too tight, this is too loose. But also adding sticks and things in the back kind of can help even that out. So kind of a long answer, but
Oh, great answer.
but it's just one of those things you learn to work with it after a while. It's I don't know, I feel like it's just sort of, it takes time and experience and a lot of patience. And yeah, and now I don't even really think about it. You know, I just like tension it and then keep going. But it's also, people work with different tensions and people's looms are different. So it makes it, everybody's, you know, weaving is going to end up looking just slightly different, which is pretty cool. And I know it's the same thing too on floor looms. I feel like you have a little bit more control. Is it more control? What do you think, Jenna? Do you think you have more control over it, or is it the same kind of thing?
I can't hear you over the sound of my loom very much. Tension control.
Do you think it's like, do you feel like you have more control of your tension on a floor loom, or is it the same thing where you intuitively just naturally kind of put your loom into a similar tension with whatever you're weaving just over time and experience? Or are you really like, okay, I'm gonna practice weaving with this kind of tension and this kind of tension. I'm gonna see what beat I like better.
I usually have a sort of default tension. My autopilot goes, does a certain thing, but then if it's not going to work for a project, I do, I make a note. Okay, now I need the tension tighter, or I need the tension. Hardly ever do I need it looser, but, and then I have to sort of, remind myself, check in every once in a while. Did I do the thing I need to do with my tension this time? Since I can't rely on my autopilot. as for whether it's easier on a floor loom to get that sweet spot, perfect tension, it depends in part on the same thing, the ratchet and pawl, and the difference between, how much space there is between each tooth on the ratchet, and whether the loom has ratchet and pawl on the cloth beam and the warp beam, or it has a friction break on the back. If you have a friction break on the back, you can advance it as far as you need to, and then adjust the friction to get it to be exactly where you want it to be more easily than if you've got like a ratchet where the tooth could only be in a certain spot. And of course, another option you've got with a floor loom, and I suppose you could figure out how to rig it up on a rigid heddle too, actually, would be a live weight tension. And then you always have the same tension, or at least, if it's set up to operate smoothly, you always have the same tension. And that's great. But then you have, it's extra equipment and you have to know how to set that up. It's not, looms do not generally come with live weight.
I think that would be a really interesting engineering process, is to create something like a live weight tension with the back.
Yeah. Yeah. My new AVL workshop Dobby has built-in live weight tension. AVLs do have live weight, just they have a weighted tension anyway, but they even did it on the little bitty workshop Dobby. And I don't know if it's the loom or if it's me. I haven't yet figured out how to make that go, and I didn't have enough time playing with it to sort it out. But if you could get a look at one that was set up properly, that would be a good example to follow for a rigid heddle, because it's a similar, it's just a 24-inch and narrow beam, and it's cords rather than a heavy weight hanging down. So could
Sure, if everyone knows what a live weight tension is, I think
it has come up in webinars in the past, the fairly distant past, and I think so they're in recordings. If you did a search in the recording under event recordings for live weight, you'd find recordings where that shows up in the transcript. And Dawn, do you remember, did Tien maybe do a blog post on it?
I am blanking out on that.
So it's possible. So if you search, if you use the network, or if you use the search on the dashboard for live weight tension, you'll find stuff. But we haven't done like a focus, we haven't like shown it in use on a loom, because neither of us have had looms set up with the live weight on it in a way that we could get like video.
Let's see, I'm going to do a quick search. Guess what time it is?
Oh my gosh.
Is it time o'clock?
It is time o'clock.
Wow. Well, I've got that much to go before I hit 84. So I don't know what that is, 40 inches maybe. Not too bad.
Nice.
All right, let's see what's coming up next. In an hour, I think we have
design sessions.
Design sessions with Tien. That is in an hour, right? Yes. Sorry, I was trying to do conversion in my head. Peer support is on Saturday the 19th, and we have a live lecture on April 27th. So let me just quick check and see if there's any no, I don't have any last minute questions. Thank you very much.
All right, so this is our last live at the loom for the stash weave along, but we do have it now regularly on the calendar every 6 weeks. So just whatever we have on the loom, whoever's weaving, might still be this one for me. Excuse me. Pardon me.
Oh,
okay.
All right. Well, I hope we see you all soon. Maybe in an hour even.
Awesome.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Later.
Bye.
Hugs.